Before we kick off, it has to be said that we have to thank, Fabric, Delphi, Game 7 backed to bring us together in this beautiful city. It's an absolute honor, and it's one of those moments where we're surrounded by so much talent. So I'd encourage you guys to make the most of it, because the people that are here today will be inaccessible in years to come. so yeah, make the most of it. And with that, thanks again for bringing us together. And then, let me introduce the Playbook, community building in Web3 gaming. Gentlemen, if you could please give us an intro about yourselves.
Go for it. So my name is Tomer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Addressable. Addressable does user acquisition in Web3. So we actually connected dozens of millions of wallets to add IDs in multiple networks. So you can actually target people according to wallet identity on the ad networks that everybody uses. So Twitter ads, DSPs, Iron Source, and so on.
Hi everybody, my name is Adoni from Immutable. I'm in the BD team, and I focus on our strategic partnerships with the top 20, 30 studios, like the Ubisoft deal we recently announced. But I also work really close with our studio team because, as you know, Immutable is a tech stack for game developers, but we're also a studio building our own games. So community building, UA, all of that stuff is very close to my heart. I was previously in ad tech, so excited to get into it.
Awesome. And a quick intro about myself, Dane Hammer. I've been building games on blockchain for the last 3-4 years. For my sins, discovered a whole range of problems and set up a collective of OGs who have surfed away from Web 1, 2, and 3 to solve foundational problems, and user acquisition being one of them. So I guess let's ease into it with a question on, from your experience, what do you think is the need for improving UX that could then lead to better user acquisition? Any thoughts or starters for that?
Yeah, sure. I think today we have to think about in the future communities are going to be gamer communities, right? They're not going to be the Web3 enthusiasts. So I think from a UX perspective today, it's extremely cumbersome to onboard someone into a game in an experience that's similar to a Web 2 experience, right? So you're asking them, it's not seamless enough. So you're asking them to make an intellectual decision. Should I be a proponent of Web 3 or not? Then instead, we should just be introducing the features at some point in that journey. So a lot of our games are free. They start as free-to-play games. And when the gamers want to engage further with crafting, with tradability, you should be able to introduce Web3 in a way they don't have to make a intellectual decision about it. So make that a lot more seamless. And those are some of the products that we're building today to really collapse those friction points.
So we definitely see that the challenge between making the ownership in the game very sticky. So you give the people to own things in the game, and on the other hand, you want them to onboard seamlessly without providing any type of wallet up front.
Yeah.
And this user experience challenge, we see this in another angle where you want to incentivize people inside the game with some tokens or some giveaways or some nice parts that will attract them to play more, to spend more, but you don't want them to abuse that. And Web3 games that we work with are all struggling with the same thing. They want to incentivize people, not to incentivize bots. So a lot of the challenge is not just to let people to onboard seamlessly, but also to avoid those kind of bot farming and token farming user experiences that we see possible when you incentivize. And this connection requires a very delicate tango between seamless landing page, you want to incentivize something, and seamless onboarding into the game, and yet you want to find out who this is so that they don't abuse this and multiply by 1,000. So this delicate tango is where we see the challenge today.
And also part of UX, I guess, is also messaging, right? Like, how do you present it? What words do you use? How do you create your narrative around it? We see a lot of the Web3 studios change that approach, putting Web3 in the background of the narrative rather than the forefront, right? It's Web3 is not the why someone will play the game, but it's the how. And alongside the product and the UX comes marketing. And how do you position that to your players?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, there's a range of learnings that we've gathered in building a variety of different games. I think the three key things that I've noticed is the fact that people just can't be bothered to create a wallet, as an example. It's 12 different steps that people have to go through to access a game, where people are used to buying a product on Amazon with 2 clicks. Not even a click, it's just a swipe right and it's at your door the next day. So, taking that kind of user behavior and, then presenting people in Web3 or, even people in Web2 with a product that needs 12 steps for you to access it is almost impossible. And we've seen, drop-off rates of approximately 80%. So that's a massive barrier. The second one is, which I believe is very important and also important for growth within the Web3 economy and adding value in users, is the fact that influencers can't, traditional credible influencers, Web2 influencers can't promote Web3 products, right? Because their followers can't access the product, so they're kind of trying to sell them something that they can't buy. That's a big problem because that's kind of a massive barrier for us to, bring more value to the space, and that being new users, because at the moment we're kind of extracting, what we have within the economy, and it's running pretty dry. So we need to fill up the bucket. So influencers play a massive role. And then lastly, I think this is where we as a community in Web3 need to take responsibility and make games a lot more accessible and easy to enter and play. So those are the 3 key things, but hugely important and massive barriers to grow the economy.
Discoverability is another thing that we've seen is a barrier. So today you have different chains, different wallets. In order to play different games, you have to buy assets in one chain. If you want to check out, you have to bridge them over. It's very cumbersome to engage with the overall Web3 ecosystem. So after you've onboarded them, after you've sent the right message, how do you then break those barriers? So I think we need technology that provides a gamer profile, like a human, an actual human, who can play games, who can engage with others in a much better way. So that's some of the challenges that we're trying to solve with tech like Passport.
Yeah. What is what from your experience, or I guess kind of from the games that you guys work with, what is kind of the biggest challenge or struggle for them generally? It's profitability, revenue, growth. What is the key challenge, generally speaking, from an outsider's perspective?
So I think a lot of the folks are finding that not only does it take a really long time to build a successful, fun, awesome game, but then you have this other vector of Web3 not having a polished playbook. No one really knows what works, what doesn't. You're then worrying about community backlash and how that's going to affect your plans. What is the monetization strategy? What is the economy design? So all of those coming together create quite a bit of a conundrum. but also present that opportunity, because now with ownership and people closer to the game, even if the game is not live yet, for example, we have Guild of Guardians, which is a mobile RPG, and if the game isn't live until Q2 next year, the NFT holders are much more committed to being in the Discord, to providing feedback. So you have all these open items that you're not sure how you're going to figure out, but you also have a very engaged community that is providing you feedback, which also increases retention metrics.
Yeah.
And so it's a hard one to figure out, but because you can now be closer to the players, the end user, I think the companies that are at the forefront have the chance to figure out that playbook and be those first movers. But it's really hard. No one yet knows. So we see the AAAs really spreading their bets between different paths. Like, okay, Web3 could just be cosmetics, or Web3 can actually be a really deeply integrated piece of our game, or so they're trying different things to figure out this playbook and trying not run out of money at the same time. So.
Yeah, we see that Web3 creates wonderful jumpstart for games. There are very few people that are doing Web3 gaming, not a lot of people at all globally, and they are very, very engaged. So it's great to start from this community. It's great to start from these NFT holders and engage Web3 community members. They are great super fans of your game. And then what's next, right? Then where do you grow from this? So the community has its own boundaries, and the Web3 gaming community is very small, so they're super engaged. It's great to start a game like that. Then you need to grow outside of the community boundaries. And this is the biggest challenge we see for the past year. So all the companies that want to grow, all the games that we work with, they all look for Web2 gamers that are Web3 curious, or they're just open to those new types of games, or just early adopters of new things. And then growing outside of this early adopter Web3 tight-knit community is always hard, because you have to change your messaging. So we saw some games changing their name from crypto to non-crypto. Let's say Cryptomon became Kmon, right? Why is that? Because they want to attract all the Web2 gamers, okay? They don't want to have crypto in their name. And it's very clear that the growth strategy to have 10x users for your game is through those people. And then you need to use those influencers and those streamers, and you need to use everything that's available in the general market of gaming for your game. So you need, and so what do you do with all the ownership, right? What do you do with all the wallets that were needed to start? So everybody solved this problem through wallet abstraction. So you join in, the wallet is created in the back end. Everybody did that in the past year, so that you can just start playing. And if you want to extract your assets, if you want to trade them in the marketplace, they exist somewhere. And you can take this asset and you can do whatever you want. So everything up front became Web 2. You approach the game with a Web 2 interface. You sign up with your email. You actually get some tokens to start play with. And this 10x growth, let's say the first year after you launch your game, you need this and that amount of daily active users. You have to get to the broader audiences of tens or hundreds of millions of people who play games. And this challenge is exciting, because you want to maintain the ownership experience. You want people to spend more money. And you want to avoid the friction of Web3. The user acquisition cost in Web3 is 7 times more than just user acquisition of regular gamers. So this is where we stand right now.
Yeah. With the principle of community and the ethos of decentralization, and there's no right or wrong answer. I guess like everything we're doing, it's very innovative, it's pioneering. We're kind of leading the way. And community is obviously hugely important, because that's ultimately what defines your brand or your business. How do how could we balance the ethos of decentralization and community building with the need for profitability and revenue generation, right? So it's in principle quite a conflicting ethos. How could we, if we had to take a shot, how could we balance that? A lot of us are trying, but there's no silver bullet yet. But if we had to, how would we balance the need for both?
If I for sure knew the answer, it would be a different story. But so my take is that there's a number of steps towards the North Star. And maybe for me, I think the North Star is IP driven by community, right? So the idea of Web3 opening up new business models and structures for user-generated content or the next level of modding, right? Economy mods. I'll give you an example. We have a game called Gods Unchained, which is a trading card game like Magic the Gathering. And the community came together and built this other add-on site on top of Gods Unchained, which allows you to easily see the latest tactics and build a deck, and really with one click, just buy your deck to go play. That's a product that we didn't build ourselves, but the community went and built, and a really big percentage of the trading volume is actually flowing through that, right? So they're pushing forward our IP. I think in the future you'll see more and more of that, but in a way where they get compensated for it, right? So I think that's a lot of the large folks, like the AAAs, that's where they see the growth. I guess the concern is that in the meantime, maybe profitability is going to go down. Maybe you have to trade off in-app purchases with secondary market and royalties, and that might not, that might hit the bottom line in some sense. But for the ones that make it to the other side, I think it's going to be a great one.
So I would say there's a difference between community participation and decentralization. I believe that what you just said is community participation, and that real decentralization I don't think it's a North Star. I think that games are companies that are built for profit, and when people work together under the structure of a for-profit company, that's one of the most efficient ways this world has for cooperation. So people cooperate for a certain goal together under a company, and I think there are a few things that we have to learn from the Web3 culture, which are how to make the community very involved in what you build as a centralized for-profit company, and how to make sure no one dinosaur eats everyone's food. So, and this is what we see, where the previous panel here discussed how a few big games now eat everyone's food, because you don't just have to compete with your own game against the new startups. You also have to compete with all the games that exist and eat everyone's food. So I think that decentralization is all about, it's not the way Web3 decentralization is total, but the decentralization we should focus on gaming is how to make sure the ecosystem is balanced and innovation is possible. So new games can come in and connect to different ecosystems that already exist and enjoy this innovative approach and new ideas in a for-profit way. And if I think about it, the nice part about ecosystems in blockchain are the composability of things. So if you have assets on one game that are tradable, and you have assets on another game that are tradable, and this ownership is connected to an ecosystem of blockchain that is not owned by one game, then you have a place where you can actually trade assets between games, and you're not locking in your users with all the assets and the money and the different achievements that they had in your game, and you actually have a way to make sure no dinosaurs remain when things can actually be extracted. So this ownership concept is really great, and I'll call it power to the community. And the balance of power is not total. You don't just give the individual the power and the companies nothing. They do need to make money to survive.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure the company, the game owner, and all the game owners survive. They make profit. And you need some balance that will, I think, will be possible now in a more tradable ecosystem than we had before.
Yeah. I think it's also important that we don't discount, what big companies have learned and done in the past. Having worked with Apple, which I believe is probably the best example in community, right? Community of people who have bought into an ecosystem worldwide. It has now driven the brand to become the most profitable brand in the world. And they started with something very simple, making technology accessible and easily accessible to all. That was their purpose, which Steve Jobs and the rest of the company very, very clearly aligned around, and it gave the user, or the community, or all these Apple fans something to galvanize around, and something that they could all believe in, and all kind of resonate with and buy into. So I think there's a lot to be learned, from companies that have, grown enormously, like Apple, Google, Facebook. All these guys have, ultimately built their companies around the brand, which, is built around the community or the user. But yeah, in terms of, the profitability aspect, I doubt, Apple had the intention of, it all started with a very clear purpose. The profitability then became through, cross-selling different products within the community, because once you bought into the iOS ecosystem, which is basically, the community of the ecosystem that you're buying into, there's a whole range of ways in which you can, create value for the community, but then also, create profitability for the brand or the game. Just as a last point, because I guess kind of, in terms of growth, community is obviously really important. What are the key learnings or advice that you could leave the audience with in terms of things to focus on to improve, growth through user acquisition, UX, or important like little nuggets of information from your expertise and your experience to leave the audience with some value?
So we're focused on user acquisition, and I'll connect to what Hannibal said in the previous panel, where you start with blockchain as your major source of data. You can actually disconnect from the different countries in your user acquisition journey and find all those people and users that are relevant to you all over the world. And in terms of user acquisition, I think that when you look at third world countries or in developing countries that have enormous adoption of specific games and specific Web3 games and means of payment, you see that with the knowledge within the blockchain, you can actually see who's a good player, who will be a very loyal player in your game, and you can actually advertise and do your user acquisition in all the possible countries and not, or the rest of the world as it described, and not just the statistically more beneficial countries that you've been doing this in the past. And blockchain data is so available to everybody that you can actually see exactly who are the users for you that have played similar games or just invested enough money in similar markets that you can actually acquire users in the most efficient way without this dichotomic approach to country-by-country structure.
Yeah, I would second that, and I would say what we're seeing is the studios. The takeaway is that it's a different iteration approach to game development and rolling it out to the users. So you're trying to figure out the playbook. A lot of folks are, before they even announce a token or NFTs, they release a game, they release playables, they release demos, they garner feedback from the community, they iterate a lot faster in deeper ways. And then through that, figuring out the marketing narrative, which we've also seen really differ by region, actually. So changing the way that you iterate and the timelines that you do so is the one thing that our studio team has found to be the most impactful.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to the sponsors.